My name is David Walters. I'm 31, an emergency room physician, born and raised here in Albany. For years, I worked 18-hour days, took call on my off shifts, and told myself I was doing it for my future. My wife, Diane, née Stapleton, worked at a national bank. We lived in a nice two-bedroom apartment, no kids, comfortable. We had plans, houses, babies, names, dreams. At least, that's what I thought. I first suspected something months earlier. Little things, odd excuses, late nights. I ignored it. I hoped it would blow over. But a seed of doubt is like a pebble in your shoe. It rubs at you until you can't think straight. I found out the extent of it in the dumbest, most ordinary way. A nurse from the ER mentioned seeing Diane at a restaurant downtown with a man I recognized from small jobs around town. Darren Ranger, married, 2 kids, landscaping company. Not the kind of man you'd expect my wife to be wrapped up with, but there they were. I tried to be the reasonable husband. I talked to my father. I told my supervisor at the hospital. I saw the in-house psychiatrist and asked for a sabbatical because I was burning out. We arranged 3 months off. I hired a private investigator. Within a week, the picture was clear. Hotel records, recurring room rentals, pictures, dates. It was almost ritual. Every week, same woman, same man. And so I planned. Not violence, not theatrics. I wasn't there to destroy anyone. I was there to end what was left of the lie and to give myself a way out. It was about 9 on a Thursday night. The Hilton downtown, not far from the Capitol. I watched Diane and Darren walk through the lobby and into the elevator. The light stopped at 12. I sat on a bench, looked at my watch, and breathed. I walked to the front desk and asked the clerk to call Mr. Darren Ranger's room. When he picked up, I took the receiver from the clerk and said, plain and slow, "May I speak to Diane Walters, please?" There was noise on the other end. Laughter, shuffled voices. He hesitated and lied clumsily that there was no one by that name, so I raised my voice. I told him, "Tell her there's been a death in her family. Tell her husband is dead." Then I hung up. Walking out, I smiled at the receptionist. I got on my motorcycle, put my helmet on, and waited. Diane bolted out of the Hilton doors a few minutes later, threw herself into a cab, and headed for home. The cab couldn't take her faster than I could ride. But she wasn't racing toward me. She was racing toward a lie she thought she could fix. She burst into our apartment frantic and started shouting for me. There were no answers. Then she found an envelope on the table with her name on it. Inside, a single sheet of paper and my wedding ring. She read aloud, voice cracking. "Diana, you can consider me dead. Our marriage has been dead for a long time. I took what I wanted. The rest is yours. Don't look for me. I'm on the road. My attorney will contact you." She clutched the ring like a life preserver and realized I meant every word. The attorney's letter arrived the next day. She had been removed from my insurance. My financial assets were withdrawn. Life insurance beneficiaries were changed to my parents. I had arranged it cold and precise. I wanted no loose ends. I wanted a severance with dignity. For me, the process was a way to stop feeling like a fool. Diane called everyone she could think of. She knocked on my parents' door only to have my mother shut it in her face. My father told her I had left the night before and refused to give her details. She tore our apartment apart trying to find me. She drank wine, tried friends, tried pity. She called the hospital and tracked down Rhonda, the nurse who'd first mentioned seeing her. Rhonda was polite but blunt. "David's not coming back for a while," she said. That stung as much as anything. For me, the plan was simple: leave, ride, and let time do the rest. I loaded a few changes of clothes, my toothbrush, rain gear, an iPad, and a map. My bike, a 2016 Honda Africa Twin, had racks, fog lights, heated grips, and a navigation system. It was perfect for long days in the saddle. I didn't want drama. I wanted distance. I started by circling New England, taking the coastal roads to Maine, then Canada, Nova Scotia, a ferry to Newfoundland. I aimed to keep off the freeways, to slow down and actually see things instead of rushing through them. I planned to head west afterward, across the prairies and the Rockies, down the coast to San Diego, and then back through the Midwest to Albany. 3 months, maybe 4. No fixed itinerary. No phone calls. A chance to regroup. On the road, I found small mercies. A flat tire near Petty Harbor that turned into a lesson in kindness when 4 strangers offered help. A repair shop in St. John's where the mechanics knew their bikes and their roads better than any map. A hotel room with a clean bed and a restaurant downstairs where I ate alone and noticed how loud the silence could be. In St. John's, while waiting for my bike to be tuned, I met a woman, a traveler from Germany preparing to ship her motorcycle to Morocco and ride across Africa. She was calm and fierce in a way that made me feel simultaneously small and unmoored. We shared stories about routes and repairs and the strange restorative power of being anonymous in a new place. For the first time in months, I slept. There were long stretches of open road after that. Moose on the shoulder in Newfoundland. Quiet towns with one main street and people who nodded as if they recognized grief. A slow, steady shedding of anger. I thought a lot about marriage and how we tell ourselves stories to keep the hard parts from showing. I thought about the hours I missed at home and whether my absence was an excuse or a truth. I thought about Diane and Darren and the tiny betrayals that become avalanches. I won't pretend it was noble. I won't pretend I didn't want her to hurt when I hurt. But what I did want, more than anything, was a clean break and somewhere down the road, the chance to breathe without that constant weight on my chest. By the time I reached the Avalon Peninsula, I felt different. Not healed. Not by a long shot, but quieter. The road had a way of rewiring priorities. The things that seemed monumental in the apartment felt smaller outside. The arguments, the future we'd planned, the ring in someone's palm. I still carried the sting of being betrayed, but I was learning to carry it with my knees bent, ready for whatever turned up next. The trip wasn't a cure. It was a pause button. It let me stop pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. It let me decide how I wanted to be when, and if, I ever returned. I considered work abroad, Doctors Without Borders, anything to reset the pattern. For a while, that idea felt as tempting as the ocean. For a while, I simply rode. If there's a moral to this, it isn't revenge. It isn't grand gestures or punishments. It's about agency. When your life is unraveling, you can fold yourself into the tangle, or you can walk or ride away and see what's left when you come back. I left the note, and I left the city. I told Diane I was dead in her world so she could face the consequences of the life she'd chosen. In mine, I was alive for the first time in a long time. This is where I'll stop for now. The road went on. So did the healing, slow as a dawn. If you want the rest, the characters I met, the places that changed me, and the choice I made when I finally came home, I can tell you that next time. It should have taken about a week to get the bike to Morocco. Her name was Emma Pfizer. She was originally from Berlin and worked for a travel company. Dressed in full riding gear, she still managed to look effortlessly stunning. In my opinion, she was around 30 to 35, about my height, 5'11" barefoot. She looked a bit like that British actress from the Mission Impossible movies, only with a charming German accent. We talked about traveling by motorcycle and all the incredible things she had seen across Canada. When I asked when she was leaving, she said, "In 3 days." So I took my chance and asked her out to dinner. She said yes. We met at a restaurant called The Salty Cod, a fitting name for a place in Newfoundland. We ate, drank, and talked for hours. That night, I slept better than I had in a long time. For the first time in years, I felt alive again. The next day, we spent more time together, talking about travel, life, and our dreams. Emma's energy was magnetic. Her smile, her voice, her confidence. Everything about her drew me in. She told me she'd already traveled nearly 40,000 kilometers and planned another 20,000 before heading home to Germany. Her next goal was to drive around the coast of Africa. Compared to my plan of driving across North America, hers sounded much more adventurous. I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, I should go with her. I even called my father to talk it over. I expected him to think I was out of my mind. But after nearly an hour of talking, both he and my mom said the same thing. "Son, this is your life. Make your own decisions." When I was a kid, my father used to say, "Fathers are where their children's dreams go to die." I never really understood what he meant until I got older. But now, it made sense. I also thought about my brother, Paul. He's 2 years older than me, married with 3 kids, and works with my dad in construction. He's built a happy life, something I once thought I had too. But my marriage had fallen apart. That night, I asked Emma if she'd mind a little company on her trip through Africa. She smiled. "Are you saying you want to come with me?" I laughed. "Yeah, I think I do." She tilted her head. "What happened to your plan to travel North America?" "Well," I said, "you've opened my eyes a bit. Africa seems more exciting. Maybe it's time to step out of my comfort zone." She nodded slowly, still smiling. "You have a problem, though. Your motorcycle is here and it needs to get to Africa." I quickly called the shipping company. They said if I got there right away and signed the paperwork, my bike could be shipped the next morning. 2 days later, I boarded a flight from St. John's to Toronto with Emma. From there, we flew to Paris, then Lisbon, and finally to Casablanca. Emma's perspective. When David said he wanted to join me in Africa, I was surprised. He seemed genuine, but I needed to be sure. I made a few calls to a friend back home in Berlin. Her husband worked for the German police. Within hours, I got confirmation. David Walters, from Albany, New York, was indeed a doctor. A respected emergency room physician on sabbatical. Divorced, no children, from a good family. That was all I needed to know. I felt relieved. Traveling with a doctor could be useful if anything happened on the road. But more than that, I could tell he was a kind man. Someone trying to heal from deep emotional pain. I'd ended a long-term relationship myself. It wasn't easy, but I knew sometimes life demanded you move on. Traveling alone had taught me strength and independence. But it could also get lonely. Maybe traveling together would be good for both of us. Back to David. Casablanca was breathtaking, a mix of old and new, tradition and modern life. Emma helped me buy the gear I needed, spare parts, tools, camping supplies, fuel containers, and plenty of water. She knew exactly what to get. We spent several days exploring the city as we waited for the ship to arrive with our bikes. The delay was frustrating, but honestly, I didn't mind. Those 8 days were some of the best of my life. I had stopped thinking about my ex-wife, Diana. Meanwhile, back home, Diana's thoughts. 2 months. No word from David. His parents refused to tell me where he was. I didn't know what to do. Our marriage was falling apart, but part of me still hoped he'd come back. I made mistakes, big ones, but I wasn't ready to let go. I felt lonely, desperate, and confused. Sometimes loneliness makes people do foolish things. David again. The beauty of Morocco was overwhelming. The landscapes, the people, the culture. Traveling with Emma was like rediscovering life. She was smart, fearless, and full of spirit. We rode through Casablanca, then along the coast to Marrakesh. The heat was brutal, the roads long, but the freedom indescribable. Emma spoke 5 languages and seemed to connect with everyone we met. Watching her interact with locals made me admire her even more. Over the next few weeks, we covered thousands of kilometers. The journey taught me humility. It opened my eyes to how different, yet similar, people are everywhere. Everyone wants the same basic things: family, peace, and purpose. I realized how much I'd taken for granted back home. We continued south through the Sahara. Endless stretches of golden sand and blue sky surrounded us. We camped under the stars, cooked simple meals, and shared stories late into the night. Each day was a new challenge. Heat, dust, breakdowns, but I had never felt so alive. Emma often reminded me to drink water, to rest, to take in the beauty around us. She was both a guide and a teacher. Our route took us across borders, through tiny villages and into vast open spaces. One night, while camping near the edge of the desert, I looked up at the stars and realized something. I wasn't running away anymore. I was finally moving toward something. By the time we reached Senegal, our bond had grown stronger than ever. We stayed in a small hotel in St. Louis, near a government building with a constant police presence. A safe area. We rested for 2 days, recovering from the long ride. I checked my email. My parents were worried, but they said they were proud of me. My lawyer told me Diana had written, asking where I was. I didn't respond. I had made peace with it. That chapter of my life was over, Emma and I had no idea what the future held, but for now, we were free. Two travelers on the road chasing the horizon 1 kilometer at a time. The mother appeared to have suffered the most trauma. David started shouting at me to help with the kids, then turned to a few others, asking them to check whether the father was alive or not. I grabbed our first aid kits from the bikes and handed them to David. He was calm, focused, and completely in control, working quickly on the mother and her children. The father was barely moving. It was obvious that freeing him from under the bus would take more strength than any of us had. Finally, the police arrived, but they mostly stood around, directing traffic. David yelled at them to call an ambulance, but they looked at him like he had two heads. An ambulance? Here? Thankfully, there were only a few passengers on the bus, and most had managed to get out, cut, bruised, but alive. The driver had a nasty head wound and would clearly need stitches. At last, the police took action. With an iron bar, they tried to lift the side of the bus enough to pull the father free. When they finally got him out, he was in terrible condition. David immediately turned his attention to the man, still shouting for an ambulance. After what felt like forever, 2 ambulances finally arrived. The mother, father, and their 3 children were carefully loaded in and taken to the nearest hospital. Exhausted, David and I sat by the side of the road drinking water. He was quietly inspecting the cuts and bruises of some of the bus passengers who had stayed behind. One of the police cars had taken the bus driver away, probably to the hospital as well, a senior officer. Clearly, someone with rank came over to speak with David. He spoke decent English and began asking questions with lots of hand gestures and nodding. I couldn't hear everything, but I soon realized he wanted to know why David was giving medical aid to the injured. When David explained that he was a doctor, the officer stepped back, spoke on his phone, nodded for a while, and then asked if David could follow him to the hospital. Apparently, the hospital needed David to explain the family's injuries. It turned out they didn't even have a doctor available at that moment, only a few overworked nurses. We followed the police car to the hospital. It wasn't like the ones I was used to seeing in Europe. The building was old, the paint faded, but it was clean, and the halls were tidy. A nurse waved her hands, saying they didn't have the capacity to take more patients. David looked around and immediately began gathering supplies. Within minutes, he had everything he needed to stitch the children's cuts. He asked me to help. At first, I was terrified. I had no medical experience, but David calmly explained what I needed to do. Stitching, he said, was mostly about patience. The hardest part was getting the curved needle through the skin. Once you did it a few times, it became easier. We worked for what felt like hours, though it was probably only 2. I had never seen so much blood in my life, but it was amazing what you could do when someone's life depended on it. David was incredible. Watching him, I almost forgot he was a doctor. Until that very moment. When danger appeared, most people ran from it. David ran toward it. We stayed in St. Louis for another 3 days. David spent most of that time at the hospital, treating patients from the accident, and many others who came after hearing that a foreign doctor was helping there. Word spread quickly. Soon, locals began bringing in relatives and friends who'd been suffering quietly for months. Some had never even seen a doctor before. David worked over 30 hours straight without rest. Eventually, I convinced him to come back to the hotel, shower, and sleep. He needed it. When we finally left town, both of us felt a little sad. We knew the people there would once again be without a doctor they could rely on. Our next stop was Dakar, the capital of Senegal. I had read a bit about it and was eager to see it. The city was full of contrasts. Shiny new buildings beside crumbling old ones, luxury cars sharing the roads with scooters held together by tape and hope. It was clear that people here lived by one rule: survive. Families had to be fed and bills had to be paid. That was life. Not much different from anywhere else, really. The only difference was my perspective. My eyes were open now. Perhaps I had my ex-wife Diane to thank for that, in her own way. Her betrayal had been the spark that pushed me to see the world differently. Every day, I understood life a little more, especially with Emma as my travel partner and guide. We decided to stay at a hotel by the beach. So far, we had been splitting the cost of our lodgings, but I knew Emma's finances were limited. I told her I needed a vacation after all the chaos in St. Louis. I could afford it. And honestly, I wanted her to relax too. We stayed 3 days, playing tourists, walking the beach, and simply breathing again. It was wonderful. Emma told me that traveling with me made her happy. I told her that she was quietly saving my life, giving me a new one. But reality always finds its way back. When I checked my email one morning, I saw a message from Dr. Laura Johnson, the chief administrator at Albany General Hospital. David, we hope you enjoyed your leave and are ready to return. Your coworker has fallen ill, and we need you back as soon as possible. Please let me know when to expect you. I'm sorry to cut your plans short, but the ER is short-staffed. Laura Johnson, I sighed. So that was it? Reality had just caught up to me. I decided to ignore the email for a few days. I wasn't ready to go back. Not yet. Emma and I talked about what came next. She suggested we ride farther south, through Namibia and down to Cape Town. From there, we could arrange to ship our motorcycles home. We contacted a bike shop with shipping connections and arranged a cargo flight for 2 days later. The flight itself was unforgettable. The plane was old. The weather rough, and the pilots looked barely old enough to shave. But somehow, we landed safely in Windhoek, Namibia. After sorting the bikes and supplies, we hit the road again. The journey to Cape Town took 5 days, 5 incredible emotional days. We both knew our time together was coming to an end, so we made the most of every moment. When we reached Cape Town, it felt like closing a chapter. We turned in our bikes. Mine was sent to storage, and David's was shipped back to the U.S. At the Frankfurt airport, we stood together quietly. No words were needed. We both knew what was coming. I looked at him, and he looked heartbroken. His eyes said more than any words could. I kissed him and whispered, "You have to go." He kissed me back and said softly, "I love you." And then, we went our separate ways. I took the letter from the table, put it in my bag, and left his apartment. That's when I realized we were done. David was over. He and I would never have a life together again. I loved that man. And I had thrown him away for something that was never worth the price I paid. Darren wasn't a prize. When I think about it now, he got what he wanted, and all it cost me was a husband I never truly wanted to lose. I was so stupid. I deserved what I got. It was time to sign the papers and let David go. David. That crazy woman tried to kiss me on her way out of my apartment. I don't want anything to do with her anymore. Now she wants us to pretend like nothing ever happened, to start over and have kids. She's not right in the head. That's not going to happen. The only thing that is going to happen, at least on my end, is that my lawyer will file for divorce. Then I can finally move on with my life. After that, I needed a long, hot shower to wash the whole mess off me. So I did. And then I had a beer, Emma Fisher. I've been very busy here in Berlin, editing hundreds of hours of video and trying to put everything in context. The dubbing has been a challenge. I'm doing 2 versions, one in English and one in German. It's a lot of work, but time has flown by. I sent David a few emails, some short videos and pictures from our trip across Africa. He looks good in those videos, even in the one where he threw his motorcycle and nearly fell over. We both laughed a lot about that. Before we traveled together, I had my friend Inger ask her husband, who works for the government, to check David's background. I wanted to be sure he was really who he said he was, not an imposter or something worse. It turned out David was exactly who he claimed to be. A week ago, Inger's husband got me an update. It seems David is back working in the emergency room, and his lawyer has already filed the paperwork for what Americans call a dissolution of marriage. That means the divorce is almost finalized. That's good, because I have some important news to tell him. But first, a few things need to be settled here in Berlin. David. Today it's official. I'm divorced. I have the papers in my hand. Thank God. Now I finally feel like I can move on with my life. Emma still calls and writes often, sharing updates about her book and her videos. She sends clips of us from Africa, including that time I nearly ran into a herd of cows because I wasn't paying attention. She laughed for hours about that. We've talked several times on the phone. I told her about Diane, about how she showed up, asking me to take her back, pretending nothing had happened. But the disrespect, the lies, they killed whatever was left. There was no going back. That realization was what made me want to step away from everything, from life itself. Emma listened patiently, but I could tell she was tired of hearing about Diane. She said she had something important to tell me, but she'd wait until I was ready to hear it. Emma, I need to tell David the news, but not while he's still angry about his ex-wife. I need him to focus on me. Maybe just a little more time, but not too much. David, it's been a week since the divorce was finalized. Now, I'm sitting at Albany Airport, about to board a flight. Chicago first, then Heathrow, and finally Berlin. It'll take about 15 hours, but I need to see Emma. It's been almost 2 months. I have to talk to her, to see if there's anything left between us after our time in Africa. If not, I'll go back home and figure out what's next. Maybe I'll join Doctors Without Borders. Maybe I'll start over somewhere else. But first I need to see her. David, Berlin. I landed in Berlin, went through customs, and took a cab to my hotel in Alexanderplatz. After a quick shower and a meal, I decided to find the building where Emma worked. When I arrived, I asked the receptionist if I could see her. The young woman looked surprised and made a call. Moments later, another woman came to get me. She said, "Dr. Walters? Follow me, please." As we walked down the glass corridors, I realized they already knew who I was. Then, suddenly, there she was. Emma. She ran toward me, smiling, and hugged me tightly. Right there in front of everyone. "David! When did you get to Berlin?" she asked. "A few hours ago," I replied. She took my hand and led me into her editing room, where she'd been working on our Africa footage. Seeing her again felt like breathing after holding my breath for months. They talked for hours about her work, her book, and their journey. Then David asked, "Do you have time for dinner?" "I'd love to catch up properly," Emma smiled. "Of course. And afterward, I want you to meet my family." David was stunned but agreed. At dinner, they laughed and reminisced. Over drinks, Emma asked softly, "So, you're officially a free man?" David smiled and pulled the folded divorce paper from his pocket. "I am, officially." "Congratulations," she said warmly. "How does it feel?" "Strange, but right. It was inevitable. She didn't want to be with me. And now I'm finally free to move forward." The next morning, they boarded a train to meet Emma's parents in southern Germany. Her father, Carl, was an engineer. Her mother, Maria, an accountant. They welcomed David kindly, though cautiously. Dinner that evening was filled with stories. Carl proudly talking about German engineering and motorcycles. Maria sharing travel dreams of Spain and Greece. David fit right in. Later that night, when they were alone, David noticed Emma acting differently, quieter, thoughtful. Then he realized she was pregnant. He asked gently, "How far along are you?" Emma hesitated, then smiled and handed him a small test from her bag. 2 blue stripes. David froze, and then smiled wider than he had in years. He reached for his bag, took out a small box he'd brought with him, and opened it. "Emma," he said softly, "will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes. Yes, I will." A few weeks later, they were married in Berlin, surrounded by Emma's family, friends, and colleagues. The story of the American doctor from Africa spread quickly through the office, and everyone came to see the couple in person. Soon after, they moved to Albany. Emma continued her work from home, and David arranged a shorter hospital schedule to spend more time with her. Months later, Emma gave birth to beautiful twin girls. Life became a whirlwind of diapers, bottles, and laughter. Both families visited often, competing over who could spoil the babies more. David would often smile quietly, holding his daughters, thinking about how life had changed. David, final monologue. Just when you think life has crushed you, something good can come out of it. I lost a wife who betrayed me, but through that pain, I found Emma. If I hadn't gotten a flat tire on that dusty road in Africa, I might never have met her. Now I have a new life, a wonderful wife, and 2 beautiful daughters. This is the life I always wanted. Emma, final words. Not long after we moved to America, I met Diane, David's ex-wife. It happened at a furniture store. My sister-in-law, Marcy, introduced us, saying, "Diane, this is Emma. She's David's wife. We're shopping for baby furniture. She's having twins." The look on Diane's face said it all. We walked away, and Marcy whispered, "Serves her right." Now, our life is full of love, laughter, and family. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch the next story.